Oh, thank you. I don't think I've heard my life story for a while, so thank you very much for that introduction. I just want to start, of course, by paying my respect to the traditional owners of this country, and of course it is a beautiful country, and each year they welcome everyone, visitors near and far, and their own families to this beautiful place to be able to share and learn together. So it is wonderful to be back in Garma. I think my last one was 3 years ago when I was running around chasing 4 teenagers from my school. So I'm teenage free now. So I'm a little bit more flexible with my time. And of course I want to also pay my respects to traditional elders and Aboriginal people who've come from different parts of the territory and different parts of Australia to share in this wonderful experience of the Garma Festival this weekend. So my job today is to do a little bit of a summary of the wonderful panel that we just heard from. And I feel extremely privileged that most of those ladies have known me since I was a baby. So they've been advocating and fighting in the space of education for as long as I've been alive. So it is a pleasure to be able to follow them and to be able to offer a couple of thoughts and feelings about education, which with role models and leaders like that and my family itself, it's a privilege to be standing in the position as Minister for Education and Workforce Training now in the Northern Territory. So from the panel, the strength of the women, of course we know when our women are strong, our communities are strong. So I think that's my biggest takeaway from listening to the ladies this morning. I really love that metaphor of the salt water and the freshwater meeting. I think we can use that metaphor in many different circumstances in our lives, whether it's with new people that we meet, whether it's a blend and mix of diverse cultures, ideas, and different ways to work out that we may come from different parts, but sometimes we have that same goal and we do want to work together, and sometimes it is a matter of making sure that water mixes so we can flow together in the same direction. So thank you for sharing that metaphor with us this morning. I did have the privilege yesterday of attending Yirrkala School and Mediki, one of the leaders there in this space, and one of the metaphors that was talked about this morning and in more depth yesterday is the using the lipa, the canoe. So everyone has a job to do when they're paddling in the canoe, and we have leaders and guides that will look for the direction that we're going in that vessel. And if we stop, then sometimes we go nowhere or we can get lost. So it is really important that all of those jobs are fulfilled. And I think that metaphor really strikes to me because it means it doesn't matter if you're sitting at the back of the canoe and you don't have the best view. If you're paddling and working with the team, then you're part of that direction and you're part of that strength of that team and where you go. So I really do love that metaphor as well. Engagement and negotiation of culture and language is absolutely critical for our young people here in the Northern Territory. And we know that across the different levels of education, from the early years to the primary years and also through our secondary years, and eventually to our transition into workforce, we as a government recognise the strengths-based approach of recognising that young people do not come into a school as blank slates. I think that's a bit of a Western model that we've got these young minds that we can mould and shape. It's not quite the case here in the Territory. Young people come with such a wealth of knowledge and experience, even when they're young babies. They already are exposed to language and culture in remote areas, and of course the strength of the kinship system. So you ask any 5-year-old walking around in a community street, they can probably name you every single person in the community and how exactly they're related to that person. So recognising that as a strength, language and culture is so important for Aboriginal Territorians. And of course in our remote areas, that is an element that we love seeing in our schools and that we recognise is very important in our schools for our communities to be strong and for our Aboriginal people to be strong in education. I just wanted to share a little bit. I do have a proper speech later on in the day, but I won't pull that one out now. I'll save that for this afternoon so I don't repeat myself. But I do just want to bring a couple of points in terms of our government agenda today, just to sort of set the scene. And if you do have any questions later on, I'm here all day and tomorrow, so I'm very happy to have conversations with people and hear your thoughts and ideas on education and to share that today and tomorrow. Our government, the Northern Territory government, is pushing a local decision-making agenda here, and that goes across all agencies. And I'm very proud to say that the Education Department is moving forward in strides in making sure that we're focusing on what communities want for their students, how communities can map and strategise and determine what they want their students to learn and what the outcomes are for their students to learn when they're going through those levels of education. In particular, the early years learning space is critical. We know that the first 1,000 days of a child's life is absolutely critical in terms of their growth and the development, and setting that up in a positive way so we can slow down that gap, and you know, the gap of knowledge was also mentioned today. So not just that, all the critical issues that we do see facing here in the Northern Territory and other parts of Australia, but of course talking from a territory context, looking at making sure that we can do the most for our children at that critical stage. So our Northern Territory government has the Families as First Teachers program, which has been so successful in remote areas that it's actually now being rolled out into urban areas. So we've started it off as being an Aboriginal remote program, and now it's opened up to be so critical and so positive in terms of the early years learning space, that we now have urban schools and regional schools that are taking on this model, and very happy to talk about that in more depth later on with people offline. Supporting communities to be empowered is basically the heart of local decision making. We want to support schools to become as self-sufficient and as determined as they possibly want. So looking at community-led schools model and making sure that we're able to support from a department perspective and a government perspective, schools can lead their own journey, and that's what really local decision making is about. Again, strengths-based model. I'm a teacher by background, so I think absolutely every child has strength, and I would not like to think that anyone would look at a child, no matter what age they are, and think of the deficiencies that they have. I think looking at the strengths and how we can build capacity for our students is absolutely important, and I'd like to think that having good support around our students in all ages of their learning and all levels of their learning, and the strengths-based model is what we'll be looking at to approach education here in the Northern Territory, and we'll continue to do so. Local capacity building for our education staff working in remote communities. Yeah, thank you. Learning in our communities is also a key area that me as Education Minister and as a past teacher myself would like to improve on. So making sure we have our Aboriginal staff in schools recognised. And Yirrkala School yesterday was just an absolute buzz, seeing the team teachers working in everybody, again, the Lipa Lipa canoe, everybody has a job to do and they're just getting on and doing it and seeing it in action. It's easy to say and to promote it as an idea, but actually seeing it in action yesterday was, it really warmed my heart, and it made me feel very strong for the future in making sure we have our Aboriginal teachers recognised for their strengths in our school system, and of course building their capacity so that we can have more Aboriginal education leaders in the classroom and as principals in our schools here in the Territory. And I'm just going to wind up because I know I'm going to be told I'm talking too long. I just want to make it very clear to everyone here that the Northern Territory Government does support our homeland schools, and they come with their own mix of challenges, of course, in terms of remoteness and resourcing. But I know there's conversations, I've been asked by about 5 people this week Is the government going to be closing homeland schools? And I can assure you we're wanting that local decision making, that power of decisions to be made by communities and homelands. So yes, we do support homeland schools, and the previous Education Minister, Minister Lawler, was of course sending that message, but I want to make it very loud and clear here that we do support homeland schools, and myself as Education Minister personally, I think it's an absolute jewel in the crown of Territory education to be able to have our young people, our Aboriginal young people, learning on country with their families. So I just want to make it very clear here today that homeland schools is a big part of Northern Territory education. Thank you.